8. Singers. Morris Day never forgave. Here's why. They say time heals all wounds, but not for Morris Day. Behind the flashy suits and unforgettable funk grooves, Morris carried grudges so deep they shaped his entire legacy. From rivals who copied his style to stars who stole the spotlight, he never forgave them, and he wasn't shy about saying why. Some of these names will shock you. Others will make you wonder if he was right all along. Before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, and get ready because this story is about to get messy. Prince. When you talk about Morris Day's grudges, none cut deeper or lasted longer than the one with Prince Rogers Nelson. Their story wasn't just about music. It was about two young men from Minneapolis chasing the same dream, only to clash over power credit and identity. Morris and Prince first crossed paths in the late 1970s, both local talents with sky-high ambitions. Prince was already making waves with his self-titled 1979 album showing the world he could sing, write, produce, and play nearly every instrument. Morris, meanwhile, was building his reputation as a charismatic performer with undeniable stage presence. Their friendship took a pivotal turn in 1981 when Prince decided to create a side project, The Time. He handpicked Morris as the lead singer, envisioning a band that could explore funkier, riskier sounds without compromising his own brand. At first, it seemed like a golden opportunity. With Prince writing the songs and playing many of the instruments in the studio, The Time delivered instant hits like Cool and Get It Up. On stage, Morris added his signature swagger, sharp suits, and comedic timing, giving the group its unforgettable flavor. But behind the glitter, tension simmered. Morris felt like a puppet in Prince's empire, frustrated that the man who handed him the spotlight also refused to share full creative control. That friction exploded in 1984 with Purple Rain. In the film, Morris literally played Prince's rival, leading The Time against the revolution. The on-screen drama mirrored real-life constant arguments, backstage rehearsals, turning into competitions, and a growing resentment that Prince saw Morris as an accessory rather than an equal. Fans often walked away from concerts saying, The Time nearly outshined the headliner, a fact that drove Prince to push himself harder. But Prince had the industry on his side. His groundbreaking album 1999-1982 and then Purple Rain 1984, which sold over 25 million copies worldwide, catapulted him into global superstardom. Grammys, Academy Awards, and sold-out arenas cemented his throne. Morris, meanwhile, broke away from The Time after the Purple Rain tour, determined to stand on his own. His solo debut, Color of Success 1985, earned moderate recognition, but it was clear he couldn't match Prince's tidal wave of success. The rivalry never truly cooled. In the years that followed, Prince exercised his control over The Time's name-blocking Morris Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis from using it on new recordings. Every reunion came with strings attached, and decades later in 2022, the feud resurfaced posthumously. Prince's estate informed Morris that he could no longer perform as Morris Day and The Time, citing a 1982 contract Prince had drafted. Morris went public outraged that after 4 decades of carrying the brand, he was being stripped of it. At its heart, this grudge was more than business. It was personal. Morris admired Prince's genius, but resented how it overshadowed his own legacy. Prince, for his part, likely respected Morris's flair, but never ceded authority. Theirs was a relationship built on talent rivalry and a constant tug-of-war for respect. Do you think Prince and Morris could have achieved even greater success if they had truly collaborated as equals instead of rivals? By the time of Prince's passing in 2016 at the age of 57, the wounds had never healed. Prince had sold over 150 million records worldwide, leaving a monumental legacy. Morris, still touring and still sharp-tongued, carried with him not just memories of their shared rise, but the bitterness of battles never resolved. For him, Prince wasn't just another rival, he was the friend who became the hardest to forgive. Terence Trent D'Arby. If Morris Day hated one thing more than anything else, it was someone acting like they invented swagger. And in the late 1980s, that person was none other than Terence Trent D'Arby, bursting onto the global stage in 1987 with his debut album, Introducing the Hard Line. According to Terence Trent D'Arby, this London-born singer shook the industry with his booming voice, daring style, and most infamously, his mouth. D'Arby didn't just arrive, he announced himself as the second coming. In interviews, he claimed his album was better than the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Bold. Yes. Arrogant. Absolutely. To critics, his confidence was refreshing, but to Morris Day, who had been strutting in sharp suits and laying down funk long before Terence ever touched a microphone, it was pure disrespect. The album was a runaway hit, selling over 1 million copies within 3 days of release in the UK, and eventually going multi-platinum worldwide. Singles like Wishing Well and Sign Your Name dominated charts. But Morris didn't see brilliance. He saw an industry swooning over someone he believed was more style than substance. The eyeliner, the dramatics, the cocky interviews, it all felt like an imitation of a lane Morris had already paved in funk and performance. To Morris, the problem wasn't just Terence's music. It was the audacity. Funk was about authenticity, sweat, and soul. When Morris took the stage with The Time, every move was rooted in years of Minneapolis grit. Watching Terence pose as though he had invented showmanship made Morris bristle. He once scoffed, "This cat walking around like he's the future." Please. I've been cocky since birth. Do you think Terence's confidence was misunderstood genius, or did he really cross the line into arrogance? By contrast, Morris Day never let go of that first impression. For him, Terence symbolized everything wrong with how the industry crowned new kings. Morris had already fought battles with Prince Rick James and others to defend his throne as funk's original bad boy. Seeing a newcomer strut in with proclamations of greatness felt like one insult too many. Decades later, Terence reinvented himself under the name Sananda Maitreya, moving away from mainstream fame to pursue music on his own terms. Morris, meanwhile, continued performing, carrying with him the attitude that had defined him since the early 80s. But that early clash of egos, Morris's lived-in confidence versus Terence's self-declared supremacy, remains one of the sharpest grudges in his memory. For Morris Day, Terence Trent D'Arby wasn't just another rising star. He was the loud, eyeliner-wearing symbol of an industry that sometimes preferred flash over funk, and that was something Morris could never forgive. Rick James. Few rivalries in funk history carried as much fire as the one between Morris Day and Rick James. Both men were larger than life, both were masters of style, and both fought tooth and nail to claim funk's throne. But what began as a competition of music quickly spiraled into an unshakable grudge. By the early 1980s, Rick James had already established himself as a dominant force. With hits like Super Freak 1981 and his platinum-selling album Street Songs, Rick had become Motown's biggest star of the era, blending raw funk with streetwise grit. He embodied excess wild costumes, flamboyant hair, and a notorious rock and roll lifestyle. Then along came Prince, and by extension Morris Day and The Time. Suddenly, Rick saw challengers circling his empire. To Rick, The Time looked like nothing more than Prince's funk clones. He made no secret of his disdain, openly mocking Morris's group as puppets. For Morris, that insult cut deep. He prided himself on sharp presentation and tight grooves, and being dismissed as someone else's copy hurt his pride. His response: double down on elegance tailored suits, synchronized moves, and a brand of funk that screamed sophistication over chaos. The feud wasn't just musical, it was cultural. Rick's brand of funk was raw, sweaty, and street-born, while Morris presented a cooler, cockier, more refined version. Fans loved both, but the media often pitted them against each other. Rick believed Prince had stolen the sound he pioneered, reshaping it into something experimental and eccentric, while critics hailed it as innovation. That recognition, or lack thereof, fueled the fire. At one point, Rick even accused Prince of deliberately undermining him on tour. When Prince and his crew refused offers of cocaine from Rick's circle, Rick felt disrespected, as if they were looking down on him. The tension only deepened as Prince's fame skyrocketed in the mid-1980s, overshadowing Rick's reign. For Morris, caught in the middle, Rick's barbs always circled back to him. If Prince was a thief, Morris was by association part of the crime. The grudge between Morris and Rick wasn't just about personal slights, it was about legacy. Rick wanted credit as the torchbearer of funk, while Morris wanted respect as the man who could command any stage. Neither was willing to concede ground. Even when Morris joked about Rick's style being too messy, there was real resentment underneath the humor. In truth, Rick James's decline had more to do with his personal demons. By the 1990s, he was battling addiction and legal troubles, while Morris continued touring with the time. Rick passed away in 2004 at just 56, leaving behind a complicated legacy, part genius, part chaos. Yet Morris never softened his stance. To him, Rick wasn't just a rival. He was the man who doubted his authenticity, and that wound never healed. For fans, the Morris Day-Rick James feud remains a fascinating snapshot of funk's golden years. It wasn't just about songs or style, it was about two kings of attitude, each convinced the other was stealing their crown. And for Morris Day, forgiving Rick James was never an option. El DeBarge. When it came to confidence, Morris Day had no rival, or at least that's what he believed. Suits pressed to perfection, steps choreographed down to the flick of a wrist, and a charisma that could light up any room. But then came Eldra Patrick DeBarge, better known as El DeBarge, a man whose angelic falsetto and boyish charm threatened to outshine Morris in ways that cut deeper than music. El rose to fame in the early 1980s as the lead voice of the family group DeBarge. With hits like All This Love, 1982 Time Will Reveal 1983, and the undeniable party anthem Rhythm of the Night. 1985. El quickly became Motown's golden child. His voice soared effortlessly, pulling at the heartstrings of fans across the globe, while his striking looks made him a favorite in magazines and TV specials. Where Morris exuded cocky funk energy, El radiated a softer romantic allure. And that in Morris's world was a problem. The tension wasn't just artistic, it was personal. Morris prided himself on being the man women swooned over in clubs, the one who could command attention simply by walking into the room. Watching El DeBarge effortlessly charm crowds without breaking a sweat sparked envy and resentment. Morris once quipped that El sang like he was afraid to sweat a jab that revealed how little he valued the polished, pretty boy delivery that El embodied. For Morris, funk wasn't supposed to be clean. It was supposed to be gritty, sweaty, and lived in. Whose style would you choose, El DeBarge's smooth romance or Morris Day's raw funk swagger? What deepened the grudge was how differently the industry treated them. While Morris battled to escape Prince's shadow and carve out his own identity, El was embraced as Motown's fresh new star, the face and sound of a younger generation. El's ability to sing falsetto with clarity and emotion made him the darling of radio, while Morris's funk persona often got pigeonholed as entertainment. In the eyes of audiences, and especially the women, El was irresistible. But behind the glossy image, El DeBarge's journey was far from perfect. His family life was marred by hardship and struggles with substance abuse, and though his solo career included successes like Who's Johnny 1986, he never reached the consistent commercial heights of Prince or even Rick James. Still, in Morris Day's mind, none of that mattered. El represented a direct challenge to the territory Morris claimed as his own, being the ultimate showman, the center of attention, the man every woman wanted. Decades later, the contrast between them remains sharp. Morris built his name on funk bravado humor and bold theatrics, while El left behind a legacy of tender ballads and high notes that could stop a room cold. Fans loved both, but Morris never forgave the way El managed to pull the spotlight without even trying. For Keith Sweat. By the late 1980s, R&B was changing. Smooth ballads were beginning to dominate the charts, and at the forefront of this shift stood Keith Sweat. His 1987 debut album, Make It Last Forever, became a multi-platinum phenomenon thanks to the pleading title track and the up-tempo smash I Want Her, which peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Sweat's distinct voice, dripping with urgency, carved out a new lane in R&B, a style built on emotional vulnerability and raw yearning. Fans called it romantic. Morris Day called it embarrassing. For Morris, who had spent his career perfecting an image of self-assured swagger, Keith Sweat's approach felt like the polar opposite of everything funk stood for. Where Morris believed in walking into a room and owning it, Keith sounded like he was begging to be let in. "Stop crying on the track," Morris once joked, dismissing Sweat's heartfelt delivery as desperation disguised as seduction. To him, confidence was the ultimate aphrodisiac, and Keith's brand of vulnerability didn't belong anywhere near funk's crown. Sweat, however, wasn't just a passing fad. His influence on the New Jack Swing era was monumental. Teaming up with producer Teddy Riley, he helped blend hip-hop beats with R&B melodies, reshaping the genre for a younger audience. His albums throughout the late 80s and early 90s, I'll Give All My Love to You 1990 and Keep It Comin' 1991, cemented him as a consistent hitmaker. Women adored the way he sang like his heart was breaking in real time, and that adoration only widened the rift in Morris's mind. Do you prefer your R&B singers confident and bold like Morris Day, or emotional and vulnerable like Keith Sweat? Part of Morris's irritation came from the cultural shift Keith represented. In the 1980s, funk had been bold, brash, and dripping with attitude, exactly the world Morris dominated. By the 1990s, the genre's center had shifted. Ballads filled radio airwaves, and Sweat's brand of pleading love songs was leading the way. To Morris, this wasn't just about taste, it was about survival. Funk was losing ground, and Keith was part of the reason. Yet Sweat's formula worked. By the mid-1990s, he had scored numerous #1 R&B hits, including Twisted and Nobody, both from his 1996 self-titled album that went quadruple platinum. While Morris could still sell out live shows with his trademark stage antics, he no longer had the same commercial reach as artists like Sweat, who connected deeply with the mainstream audience. The contrast stung. What made The Grudge particularly sharp was that Morris didn't see Keith as untalented. He saw him as misguided. In Morris's philosophy, seduction came from making it look effortless, the slick walk, the confident smile, the sense that you already had what you wanted before you even asked. Keith flipped that script, turning desire into a plea, and fans loved it. That, more than anything, was unforgivable to Morris, who built his entire identity on being untouchably cool. In the end, Keith Sweat's legacy as the king of New Jack Swing is secure. His influence can still be heard in modern R&B acts who lean into emotional vulnerability. Morris Day's legacy, meanwhile, is rooted in a funk tradition that thrived on boldness and flamboyant style. The two men stood for entirely different visions of what R&B could be, and for Morris, that contrast was more than just musical preference. It was a line in the sand, one he never forgave Sweat for crossing. I'll Be Sure. In the late 1980s, R&B entered a smoother, more delicate phase. At the center of this transition was Al B. Sure-born Albert Joseph Brown III. With his debut album, In Effect Mode 1988, Al B. Sure became an overnight sensation. The record went triple platinum, powered by the single Night and Day, which climbed to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 and held the top spot on the R&B chart for weeks. His soft-spoken, falsetto, curly-haired image and gentle stage presence made him the poster child for a new wave of romantic R&B. But for Morris Day, that approach wasn't just uninspiring, it was downright offensive to the spirit of funk. Morris had built his career on flamboyance, confidence, and larger-than-life showmanship. Funk in his eyes was supposed to be bold and in-your-face, never hesitant. Watching Al B. Sure croon in a near whisper only to have women screaming in adoration drove Morris crazy. He once mocked Al's falsetto as nothing more than a nap whisper, suggesting it lacked the grit, fire, and sweat that defined real funk performances. To Morris, this wasn't just about preference, it was about defending a tradition. The contrast between the two couldn't have been starker. Morris came from the Minneapolis sound, pioneered alongside Prince A sound that blended funk rock and R&B into high-energy explosions on stage. Al B, sure by contrast, embodied a polished, refined aesthetic with music that leaned into romance rather than bravado. For audiences in the late 80s, both had their appeal. But in Morris's mind, Al was draining the life out of funk by pushing it into soft, watered-down territory. Do you think R&B should lean towards smooth romance like Al B, sure, or keep the bold edge of funk Morris Day championed? Despite Morris's disdain, Al B sure had undeniable impact. He was instrumental in the rise of the new Jack Swing era, blending traditional R&B melodies with contemporary production. His success also helped open the door for other crooners with gentle falsettos, proving there was a massive audience for this softer side of R&B. Yet for Morris, this shift represented the industry moving away from the showmanship and attitude that had once made funk king. What stung even more was how easily Al attracted attention. Where Morris had spent years perfecting every move, every outfit, and every ounce of stage confidence, Al seemed to win over fans simply by standing there with a microphone and whisper singing into it. For someone like Morris, who prided himself on being the life of the party, that effortless charm felt like an insult. In later years, Al's career slowed, though he remained a respected figure in R&B. His influence carried into the next generation. His son Quincy followed him into music and entertainment. But Morris never forgot how Al's rise represented a shift away from the energy he believed kept R&B alive. To him, Al B sure symbolized a softer, diluted form of the genre that compromised its funk roots. For fans, Al B sure will always be remembered as the romantic crooner who gave them timeless ballads. For Morris Day, however, he was the reminder of a music industry that often preferred smooth edges over the raw swagger he had perfected. And for that reason, Al B sure remained firmly on the list of singers Morris Day never forgave. Cisco. By the late 1990s, R&B had a new wild child, and his name was Cisco. Born Mark Althoven Andrews, he shot to fame as the lead singer of Dru Hill, before breaking out on his own in 1999. His debut solo album, Unleash the Dragon, delivered one of the most unforgettable pop culture phenomena of the era. Thong Song. It was a hit everywhere, peaking at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, going platinum and earning multiple Grammy nominations. But while fans were dancing and laughing along, Morris Day was fuming. To him, this wasn't evolution, it was mockery. What Morris saw in Cisco wasn't innovation, but imitation turned cartoonish. The platinum silver hair, the flamboyant outfits, the acrobatics on stage, it all felt like a watered-down version of the funk showmanship Morris had mastered in the early 1980s. Silver hair, I did that in '84. Morris once scoffed, suggesting Cisco wasn't breaking new ground but recycling old tricks with clownish exaggeration. For Morris, style was supposed to be sharp, iconic, and rooted in cool. Cisco, he felt, had turned it into spectacle. The biggest insult came with Thong Song. While undeniably catchy, Morris dismissed it as shallow and gimmicky, claiming it set R&B back rather than pushing it forward. In his eyes, funk and R&B were about groove, soul, and endurance. Thong Song was a novelty track, fun for the moment, but lacking staying power. The fact that it became a global anthem only deepened Morris's frustration, reinforcing his belief that the industry now rewarded spectacle over substance. Do you think Cisco's Thong Song was harmless fun, or a low point for R&B's credibility? What made the tension sting even more was how Cisco embraced theatrics as his identity. With Dru Hill, his voice had helped deliver heartfelt hits like In My Bed and Never Make a Promise. But solo, he leaned into outlandish visuals and shock value. That pivot convinced Morris that Cisco represented everything he despised: flash over funk, gimmick over groove. And yet Cisco's moment in the spotlight was massive. Unleash the Dragon sold over 5 million copies worldwide, making him a household name. He toured arenas, performed at award shows, and became a pop culture reference point. Even though his follow-up work never matched that peak, the image of a silver-haired Sisqó leaping across stages while belting about thongs has remained permanently etched into music history. For Morris, however, the grudge never faded. To him, Sisqó was a parody of everything funk legends like himself had worked to build. Where Morris embodied a balance of humor, bravado, and authentic funk energy, Sisqó turned performance into a circus act. It wasn't just competition, it was insult, and Morris Day never forgave being turned into a blueprint for someone else's cartoonish fame. In the end, fans may remember Sisqó as the exuberant hitmaker who gave the world a cultural phenomenon. But in Morris Day's book, he was the flashy imitator who cheapened funk's legacy. And that perhaps more than anything else secured Sisqó's place on the list of singers Morris Day could never forgive. Bobby Brown. If there was one title Morris Day guarded fiercely, it was being the original bad boy of funk and R&B. From his days leading the time, he strutted across stages in bold suits and lived for the kind of swagger that made fans scream. But in the late 1980s, another young star stepped forward with the same label, and his name was Bobby Brown. For Morris, that wasn't just coincidence, it was competition. Bobby's career began with New Edition, the pioneering boy band that gave the world hits like Candy Girl 1983. But after tensions in the group, Bobby left to pursue a solo career. In 1988, he unleashed Don't Be Cruel, an album that would change the sound of R&B. Fueled by Teddy Riley's new Jack Swing production, the record sold over 7 million copies in the US alone and delivered smashes like My Prerogative and Every Little Step. Bobby didn't just sing, he danced, he posed, he embodied rebellion. Soon magazines and fans alike began hailing him as the bad boy of R&B. Do you think Bobby Brown truly earned the title, Bad Boy of R&B? Or was Morris Day the original who never got the credit? The similarities only fueled the tension. Bobby wore the slick suits, pulled off precise choreography, and projected an air of untouchable cool, all qualities that mirrored Morris's stage persona. But while Morris perfected the art of performance, Bobby had the hits. Don't Be Cruel dominate. The T never reached those heights. The contrast stung deeply. Adding to the frustration, Bobby's reputation outside music only amplified his bad boy brand. His tumultuous relationship with Whitney Houston, legal run-ins, and on-stage antics kept him in the headlines. For Morris, who had carefully cultivated his own edgy but polished image, Bobby's chaos threatened to redefine what being a bad boy even meant. Instead of the stylish sophistication Morris embodied, Bobby's version leaned into rebellion, scandal, and controversy. Still, Bobby Brown's cultural impact is undeniable. By the early 1990s, he had become a household name, and his influence on R&B and hip-hop crossover paved the way for generations to come. Songs like My Prerogative weren't just chart toppers, they were anthems of independence and defiance. Meanwhile, Morris continued performing with the time keeping funk alive on stage, but never matching Bobby's commercial dominance. For Morris Day, though, none of that mattered. What mattered was the principle he had built the archetype of the cocky, cool funk bad boy years before, and now Bobby was being hailed as the face of it. That wound never healed. In the end, Bobby Brown's legacy is complicated. Equal parts groundbreaking music and notorious controversy. Morris Day's, by contrast, remains rooted in funk tradition and unmatched stage charisma. But in Morris's mind, one truth stands firm: when Bobby Brown claimed the bad boy crown, he crossed a line. And that's why Morris Day never forgave him. Morris Day's story proves that funk was never just about music. It was about pride, image, and legacy. From Prince to Bobby Brown, these rivalries remind us how ego and artistry often collide in unforgettable ways. But here's the question: were Morris's grudges justified, or was he simply too protective of his crown? Some say he defended funk's true spirit, Others believe he couldn't handle the new generation. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments because the debate is far from over right here on Legends of Black Excellence.